And but first off, some big news for Baylor in that President Linda Livingstone, Craig, signed to a 10-year extension. There were some thoughts that she would be a candidate for the Big 12 commissioner to the NCAA president, as she is on the governance, the transformation committee. But to me, I do think, and you'll see this quite a bit, especially when it comes to the NCAA side, where would you rather be? A university president where you can kind of enact actual change, or the figurehead of an organization that you don't even know is going to exist 5-10 years from now, at least in its current form?
Well, I think there's a few factors that go into that. Like, what's the payday? This is about as random of a comparison as I could pull out. I don't know why this came to me, though, but there was a time period there during quarantine where obviously we all had basically nothing to do. And one of the things that entertained me for a while was Dr. Disrespect on YouTube. Actually, he was on Twitch at the time. And then there was a big to-do. He got kicked off of Twitch, and it was a whole thing. And eventually, months and months later, he made his big return. But I remember when streaming and Twitch and, that whole kind of video game platform got real big, Ninja was one of the really big, highly paid streamers, right? You've heard of Ninja?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've heard of Ninja? Okay, so he was one of the big streamers, and he made a decision for big money to go jump onto this other platform, which I don't even recall the name of it now at this point. It's already shut down. But he went over there for a huge payday. And, Twitch is nice and stable, and it's fine, and there's other maybe one or two other options he had that would have been stable and nice and fine, like a YouTube, but he jumped onto whatever the one was that's already shut down, and he got a big, massive payday, but guess what? He's back on Twitch now because the whole thing folded like in less than a year's time. So, I mean, in theory, if she wanted to get my point being, if you want to just go get a big payday knowing full well the whole thing's going to crash anyways, but at least you get paid, then maybe that's a decision some people would make. But if you're looking long-term and you're looking at your current situation and the fact that you're probably getting paid pretty well right now, and you know that what you've got going on is going in a really good direction, I think it just makes all the sense in the world for her to have made the decision she made today to sign an extension. I know it's a long way to get around to that, but you could jump on for the quick buck or the quick attention or the quick spotlight. But the long-term play, I think it's a smart decision because what they've got going on right now is pretty good.
Well, and look, she's on the transformation committee, so she is privy to information that none of us have, and so she has some insight on what it could be and the kind of different,
Mixer is what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Mixer shut down,
but the different kind of, the different futures that it could be and the butterfly effect of what happens. And I only think there's a couple of those which could be, 20 or 30 possibilities of what they do that would be really attractive to someone to want that job right now. It would have to almost be everything going perfectly. And as we see, that doesn't do it. But this is great news for Baylor. And those of you who watch us who are not familiar with Dr. Livingstone's kind of ascension here at Baylor, Ken Starr was the president here. The scandal hit, Ken Starr out, Ian McCaw out, Art Briles out. Not in that order, but they were all out. And then, after an interim time, Linda Livingstone came in. And after that, a lot of these issues have been addressed. Solved would be a strong word because we don't know what's really solved, but they've addressed them in a way that they weren't being addressed before. The rest of the Big 12 Conference has a ton of respect for. The NCAA has respect for. She's kind of a rising star in the education world. Baylor has not had consistency at the presidential spot for a long time. Even a big name like Ken Starr was only here for 5 years. Less than 5 years. So he was there for 5 years. Before that, you didn't have somebody there for 10 years. You had four, like almost like presidential terms where you couldn't get reelected, just 4 years and out, 4 years and out. So this is a huge deal for Baylor University. In the last month, they've secured Mack Rhoades, their athletic director, and Linda Livingstone to 10-year deals. So they'll run concurrently, and the kind of alignment that Dr. Livingstone and Mack have all the way down the athletic department is why they're seeing success in nearly every sport right now.
Well, and to put it quite simply, the president of Baylor was being rumored to be a candidate for the head of the NCAA.
Yeah.
Now, imagine telling somebody that in like 2018 or 2019.
Yeah.
That's how good of a job she's done. I think that's the simplest way to put it. The same school who people were like, shut it down and, blah, 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 and all this other stuff. Just a few years ago, they had to basically break it on down to the bare bones and build it back up. And she and Mack Rhoades and, to other extents, Dave Aranda and many others in front of and behind the scenes have all, come on board in that time frame and really resurrected and rebuilt and strengthened, the foundation and built on top of that. And she's obviously a massive part of that. And to have her locked down, in theory for the next several years and in line with Mack Rhoades, as you said, and, Dave Aranda had a contract extension, which of course we know, like with coaches, you just never know. It's kind of just PR, if anything else. But still, to have all those folks lined up and on the same page and, heading in the same direction, I mean, that's huge. I mean, when we talk about the schools that, why are they not successful? Why can't Texas get it right? Why can't, we talk about these schools that have all the resources and everything else at their disposal, could hire anybody they want to, but no matter who they hire, it just never quite works out that way. Well, it's because they don't typically have the right alignment. There's either an issue with the AD, or there's an issue with the football coach, or there's an issue with the president, or there's some issue of some sort where people aren't on the same page or aren't rowing in the same direction. But that's why you've seen Baylor have their success, is because all of these people that came on board, they're all on the same page, and it's good to know they'll keep rowing in the same direction for a while. And I think so long as this team, so to speak, sticks together, the present is obviously very good, and the future is very bright as well for Baylor University and for the athletics programs.
Yeah, and Baylor, I mean, they did what was fortunate about Dr. Livingstone and Mack Rhoades was that they did essentially start at the same time. I mean, Mack before Dr. Livingstone a little bit, but I mean, the president that was there, David Garland, was, I mean, from the very jump, was never a candidate to be there long term. He was Jim Grobe, basically. He was interim, and so Mack knew whoever the president was going to be the person he had to have that alignment with. So them starting at the same time allowed them to start, kind of, okay, here's what I want, and find that, that direct line, which is what's kind of happened. Texas has been, for your example, everybody's kind of started at different times, and you have to adjust to each other on different timetables, putting it mildly. Plus, coupled with the expectations and the money and all that stuff, and why can't you get it right? But yeah, I think that's fortunate they both started at the same time and they've been able to run the race together.
The word that gets kind of thrown to the wayside sometimes now, because we're too busy looking at dollar signs and NIL figures, is culture. Culture is very important. Culture, whether it's college sports or pro sports or youth sports, culture is important. And it's more important than in the ways that you see just simply in wins and losses or results. And right now they've got a great culture. Previous to that, the culture was very questionable and in some ways not good. I mean, just pure not good. So that's all been, remedied as far as, we've been able to see on the surface. And, behind the scenes, it seems that things are going very well and in that direction at the same time. So, yeah, they've got great alignment right now. I mean, you see the success a lot of different programs are having. And, I think mostly you look at the football season wrapping up, and here was Dave Aranda after a 2-7 season, and everybody just wondering what the hell was going to happen with him heading into a second year. And they go and they do what they did, winning a Big 12 title and a Sugar Bowl title, and then he gets pursued or at least mentioned for basically like 10 jobs that are considered, blue-bloodish or close to that. And whether or not he was actually a real candidate for all of those jobs, I mean, obviously USC had their eyes on Lincoln Riley, but had that fallen through, do you think they give Dave Aranda a call? Probably. I would assume so. I think every job that's worthwhile that's open gives him a call or at least looks his direction. So, he in 1 year's time has turned in from a kind of shy, quiet, oh my gosh, is this going to work type of situation and guy to being one of the hottest young head coaches in all of the entire sport. Mack Rhoades, you see him. There were definitely schools, those big AD jobs that have been open here over the last few months that are getting filled up. They wanted Mack Rhoades.
USC was one of them.
Can promise you they wanted Mack Rhoades. Miami.
Yeah.
I can tell you there was a lot of people that wanted Mack Rhoades, and you may not have heard it in the headlines or all of that, but there's some people that wanted Mack Rhoades. And then you see with Linda Livingstone, the NCAA, rumors that she would be a top candidate for that presidential position. So, I mean, that speaks well of all three of them. And again, to have them all three under contract for a lengthy amount of time, even though those things can be changed, but I mean, the commitment made to Baylor and then vice versa, I think it's a big deal. You got Aranda under wraps, you got Rhoades under wraps, and now you've got your president and Linda Livingstone under wraps in theory, and that's a great thing. I think it's a really big deal. I was not expecting that. I just figured she was under contract and we weren't going to really be hearing too much. Wasn't anticipating some big contract announcement, but here we are. So good for her and good for Baylor.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of out of the blue, but not like we're privy to, you think about when the president's contract runs out.
Well, and who really talks about those things? Like, we don't really, sports radio is not talking about the university president all that often, but, and she's an athletics person. I mean, being a former athlete at Oklahoma State, so she gets that sports side of it, and you can't say that about every university president. Yeah. So that, that just plays into it as well. So, yeah, again, just a good situation. And I was writing an article about Mack Rhoades last night and some of the things that he was saying about, Baylor football and what they accomplished this year. And he helps, pave the way for a lot of that. And it was just crazy to me to think back to when he first started, and people who weren't around here then really have no idea what that was like at the time. And for a good long time, like for a good 2 years at least, was just not good at all in any way, shape, or form. And, then look ahead to when they finally kind of got over that hump a little bit and started to earn some respect back because, he changed the culture and he changed the perception, and they started doing things, a certain type of way that, brought success on the field, but also off the field as well. And so I thought about when he first arrived, and then how crazy it was to sit there in 2019 and see where they had, gotten in that 2 or 3 years time period. But then even to think back then and looking back on the feeling of, I remember vividly walking out of AT&T Stadium after Chris Platt gets chased down from behind and Oklahoma comes back to eventually beat them for the Big 12 title, and just thinking oh man, and then meanwhile, here comes all these rumors about Rule, and then the whole Sugar Bowl week, it's just all Rule in the NFL. And then Georgia kicks their head in, and then they lose the Sugar Bowl, and then he leaves. And just, it's like they had finally gotten to a point where it's like, oh, man, this is enjoyable again. And then, it gets turned up on its head. And then here we go 2 years later again. And who could have ever predicted that they would be in the spot they're in now, where they're celebrating the trajectory that they're on, the success they've had, and, the people they have in charge.
To give people a little what it's what it was like in 2016, 2017, it was like walking into a building that was on fire. And then once the building was not on fire, you kind of felt you were going to open a door and there's going to be more fire for a little bit. Oh, look, the fire's not out.
I don't really like to reflect on that time period because it was bad. But yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned during that time period. And, I'll always remember, typically driving to high school football games on a Friday afternoon, wherever we would be, if it was Killeen or Temple or here in Waco or whatever, but especially those road trips. I remember, all right, I got an hour and a half to drive, and I would have to have my phone ready to go. And the reason why was because we got to a point where every single Friday afternoon, after or around 5 o'clock, you knew there was going to be some press release of some sort or some story dropped or whatever. And that felt like it went on for about 8 Fridays in a row, if not longer than that. And I was just waiting every time I'm driving somewhere, all right, what's going to hit before I get to the stadium? And every week there was something, some new lawsuit or some new allegation or some, coach speaking out or whatever, or some recruit decommitting or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, safe to say they've come a long way since that time period. And, Linda Livingstone's played a big part in that.
Craig, did you see the conference revenues that were